Everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SharePoint at Rackspace Power Hour for our business user team here at Rackspace SharePoint Services. I'm going to be both the person starting the video and I'm going to be the presenter today. Right now, I'm joined by Kevin and Ryan, who are also on our business services team. I think we've got another person coming in a little bit later. I'm going to be doing a presentation on site closure and deletion policies, which some of you may never have heard of, but that's exactly why I'm doing a presentation on it. So I will have my coworkers introduce themselves. Kevin, if you'd like to start.
Sure. My name is Kevin Hughes. I'm a SharePoint architect here at Rackspace. I'm based out of Kansas City, and as my role on the team as SharePoint architect is pretty much to work with our clients to find out what their needs are, work out what solutions they might be able to we might be able to provide with SharePoint or other systems, and work with them and our rest of our team to get them what they need.
Ryan?
Hi everybody, I am Ryan Keller. I am based out of Colorado, and my role on the team is the branding guy. I don't know if that's my official title or not, but that's what I call myself. So my role on the team is basically to brand SharePoint, make it look not SharePointy. Take the design that the clients have or the ideas that the clients have and turn that into a functioning SharePoint site.
Thank you. And as I said, I'm Stephen Wilson. Actually, those of you who've watched the Power Hour before, you've seen me do my introduction several times. And one of the things you may have noticed is when I do my introduction, I mention that I am an admin consultant. So I actually do less of the business solutions kind of consulting that Kevin or Ryan or Laura or Joelle. I do less of that kind of stuff. And so today's topic is going to kind of blur the lines a little bit. It's a little bit admin-y, and it also has a big effect on users. And the reason I say that is both because it's a feature that a lot of people don't know about. It takes a little configuration to get it all set up. But it leads to another feature that your administrators have to set up if you're going to use it, but it can be really handy. So to start the discussion, we're going to talk about the policies that I mentioned earlier, closure and deletion. And like I said, a lot of you may never have heard of these. And a lot of you, if you are business users, if you're not the administrators of your site, you may never have even seen these options. But it's important to know that they exist. So first we're just going to hop into, well, I should back up here. We're going to hop into the site settings, and I'm going to go to the site collection administration area. And like I said, some of you may not be site collection administrators, so you won't see this area at all, but you'll want to share this information with the people who are in charge of your SharePoint sites and in charge of your SharePoint farms to see if maybe this is an idea for something that could help you organize your data. So here I go under Site Collection Administration, and I go to Site Policies. By default, there's nothing in here. There's no policy in existence. But if I hit this Create button, and I'm a Site Collection Administrator, I can create a new site policy. So I can just call this whatever I want. And here you can see delete sites automatically, close and delete sites automatically,
Hey,
or
Steven,
do not
I'm
delete.
seeing your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. You are correct. Share. Got ahead of myself. All right, so let me back up just so everybody can see that. You're going to go into Site Settings, which is normally under this little gear here, Site Settings. If you're not at the root of a site collection, you'll go to the top level, and it's in this Site Collection Administration section. You may not have this section at all. You may not have access to Site Settings, but the Site Collection Administrator should have this option. If you don't see site policies in here, by the way, we discovered earlier today, I asked Laura to look at this in Office 365. For whatever reason, in her Office 365 environment, this didn't exist. If that is the case for you, you just have to go into the site collection features, and I'm terrible at looking through lists. There it is, site policy. You have to activate this feature. Normally this is on by default, so I'm not sure if that's different for Office 365 or if it was something about the site that Laura had created. She had several of them, and none of them had it activated in Office 365. If you go into site policies here, though, you can click create. Normally there would not be nothing here, so this closure and deletion wouldn't exist. And you get the ability to name these whatever you want. Made that same typo when you guys weren't looking. You can give it a description. And then by default, do not close or delete sites automatically. That's what it is by default. There is no policy for that. But normally when you open a site in SharePoint, when you create a site, it doesn't delete automatically. It just sits there forever. And that gets to the root of why we're having this discussion. As SharePoint consultants, pretty much everybody in this Hangout has had a discussion with a user when they say, is there any way I can set SharePoint to just go back and delete any of the stuff that we have in there that's like over 5 years old? And after the fact, there really isn't a good way. You can't just wave a magic wand and tell SharePoint to delete all the sites that are old or all the sites that haven't been accessed in, 6 months, or it's not that simple. But if you plan ahead, and that's what this option allows you to do, then you can maybe get a little more control back. So if you set up a policy, here you see I have delete sites automatically, and then I have close and delete sites automatically. I'm going to choose close and delete sites automatically because it gives me the most options. So I can set an event. So I can say from the day I create it, after 5 years, close the site. Now when SharePoint closes a site, if it's just a site, it really doesn't do a whole lot. It removes it from a few roll-ups. If it is integrated with Exchange, it will stop participating in that integration, but it just closes it. It'll tell you at the top that it's closed, but you can still go in and make changes to it and use it sort of as normal. I don't really advise that, but that is a possibility. So closing it just by itself isn't really a useful option in most cases, unless you're closing a whole site collection. So if you set that policy for a whole site collection, when it's closed, it will set everything to read-only. So that means the site collection and all of its subwebs will get set to read-only. So we'll talk about it in a minute here. How do we set these policies at a site or a site collection level? But I just wanted you to be aware, at a site level, just closure is a lot less useful. After you close it, so after 5 years, you may give them 3 more months of it just being in that closed state, and then SharePoint will delete it. And you can send emails to people. You have to make sure that your outgoing email is set up in SharePoint. So if you can't get emails from SharePoint, obviously this option doesn't help you much. But you can set it to whatever interval you want. So you could send it every day. You could send it, starting 2 weeks before the deletion. Any of those kinds of things. It doesn't matter. I would recommend definitely giving people lots of warning. We've dealt with this internally, and I've seen a few people deal with this kind of stuff externally, where they send out notice after notice after notice, and then the second they actually delete something or turn it off, that's when the users are like, hey, where'd that thing go? And then you tell them, well, I sent you like 26 emails, and they're like, oh, I put you in the spam folder after the second one. So you want to give plenty of warning, and you don't want to leave it up to this, by the way. You also can set a grace period where the owner can go in and choose to delay the deletion for a set amount of time. So you may want to give them like an extra month or an extra year, whatever you think is necessary. And once you've set up this policy, I'll click OK. Then we'll go back to the site settings. And then under site administration, you'll see site closure and deletion. And you have the policy that was already there, the test policy, and then no site policy at all, which essentially is do nothing. In this case, if I set it to site closure and deletion, the one that already exists, you'll see that suddenly it tells me up here at the top, my site will be deleted 8/11/2014. But it tells me that right off the bat. If I set it to the other policy, it doesn't say anything because it's kind of far away. But on the other policy, I have it closing things much earlier. So here I have closure and delete. So I'm closing the site after 1 day, and then I'm deleting it 1 month after that. So that is just in broad strokes, that's what the site policies do. It can be useful. So one of the things that you can do, if you go back into the site settings, well, actually, I'll do it here in this sub-site. If I go into the site settings, I have this close this site now button. So I can hit this and the site is closed right this minute. So then I can have users close the sites themselves. I can tell them, if you're done with it, just close it. They don't have to delete it, they just have to close it. Then I can go in to my policies. Oh, wrong one. I can go into my policies. So where I had that other option, delete sites automatically, it may not have made, you're like, well, I can close and delete them at the same time. Why do I need the delete sites automatically? Because this one, I can go from the close date. So I can say from the close date, give it 1 month, and then I can set this to, 3 days, send it out every day, and then the user can delay it. And yes, I now realize that I misspelled delete. So if I set up this policy, then the sites that people have already closed, I can go in and I can put them in this policy, and I can just leave it. I know in a month it's going to delete it. I don't have to follow up in a month. I don't have to keep a calendar event saying, oh, you need to remember to go back and delete that closed site. So you can use this as sort of a halfway automatic management tool where you can tell people to close them manually and then you use the deletion policy after they close it, or you can do a real automatic where it will close on this day, it will delete on the the date a month or a year after that, and the whole time it will give people warnings automatically and you don't have to worry about it. That can be a fairly powerful thing. The biggest problems with it are that you need to plan ahead. So this is only really good for things that are temporary. If you have a project that you know starts on January 1st and the project ends on December 31st, then you close it out sometime after December 31st, and then you delete it sometime after that. But you can't just do it for document levels or anything like that. It has to be at the site level. The entire site has to be something that people can delete. This is useful in and of itself if you can assign policies. The problem with this is I have this set up on another site here. So I can go in here, I can go to site contents. I've got a few policies set up, and I can go and I can create a new subsite. But you can see here, it doesn't have a policy for me to choose. Even though I have policies in this site collection, I can't set it here automatically. And that is an unfortunate oversight on Microsoft's part. I don't know exactly why they did that, but that is unfortunately the way things go. And usually, this is the only way users can add new areas to SharePoint. If you ask them, hey, you need to create a new user or area for the users, an HR department or an IT department, this is where most people will go. They'll go to site contents, they'll go to subsites, and they'll create a new subsite. But that's not the only way to do it. And that's where this gets a lot blurrier. It becomes much more of an admin kind of issue. So the reason I switched over to this web application, I've done a little extra work on this one. So I've set up a site policy. Actually, I've set up two. Delete after closure, close, then delete. So this one is like the one we talked about. After 12 months of the site being closed, it will delete the site. It'll send out a warning after 3 months. It'll send out follow-ups every 14 days. And then the users can extend it for 1 month. I could apply this to any subsite that I wanted to. And then this other one, I have it automatically closing something a month after it's created, deleting it a month after that. So it would live for 2 months in total. It would send out notices a lot. Every day after the first notice, it'll send out an email a day. And here, this site collection, so any site collection that has this applied, it will actually lock it down to read-only. So after 1 month, it'll be there for another month, but they won't be able to add anything to it. They won't be able to delete anything from it. It's just stuck in time for a month, and then it deletes again. The problem here is I still have to apply it manually. But you may see this over here, publish policy. If I go back to this one, I don't see that. There's a little extra work you have to do to get this in place. So to start, the big thing you have to do is you have to make this a content type hub. So if I go into the site settings and I go to site collection features, I have to turn on content type syndication hub. That allows you to take a lot of different kinds of data from this site collection and publish it elsewhere inside of SharePoint. It really is as simple as just activating the feature normally. If that gives you an error, it may be because of the managed metadata. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because you guys are mostly business users. You're not administrators. But if you do see an error when you try and turn on the content type hub, there's a good chance that the reason is because in the managed metadata, in the properties, the content type hub may not be set. In this case, it is. It's set to the portal, which is what I'm trying to use. So I don't have to worry about it here. But just be aware, if you do get an error, that's probably where it is. So if you're working with other people to get this all set up, I just wanted to point you to some of the possible places where things might break. Unfortunately, still not as easy as I would like. So if I go back to the root of this, I have published my policies. The other thing that I need to do, and this is again in central administration, is I need to go into the web application that I'm working with, and I need to set up self-service site creation. And if I click on self-service site creation here, first of all, I can turn it on or off. In most farms, this is probably turned off. The main reason it is probably turned off is because Microsoft has done some fairly strange things with self-service site collection to make it not as friendly as maybe you would want it to be, and to not work in a way that a lot of enterprises would prefer. But when it says self-service site creation, you may be thinking to yourself, I can already create a site. You just showed me how earlier. You go into site contents, you go to the bottom of the page, and you click create subsite. That's where this gets different. This is not for creating subsites. This is to allow users to create an entire site collection. By doing self-service site collection, users can create site collections instead of having to go to the administrators. This can be huge. And the main reason this can be huge, and this is from an administrative perspective, so sometimes I tend to favor site collections because I am an administrative consultant. Because a lot of the people that I work with, the question they ask me is, after they've had SharePoint for 3 years and they have created 200 or 300 subsites, they realize that they have one single site collection that's very large. It's 200 gigabytes, 300 gigabytes, and they're like, how do I divide that up? How can I put that into additional databases? And the answer is not easily. Basically sweat, tears, maybe a little drinking. That's what you usually end up having to do to move subwebs into a separate site collection. You can do it fairly easily in some cases, but you lose a little bit of data. Sometimes you'll lose security. Sometimes you'll lose the metadata, like who uploaded what on what day, who last modified a document, all those kinds of things. And depending on how big the subsite itself is, it can be very, very difficult to move. So if the subsite itself is 40 or 50 gigs, that's a very difficult thing sometimes to move over and lose that information. And then you have to get into third-party tools and all that kind of stuff. So I always tell people, if you've got an area in SharePoint, you want to create a subsite. That's your first instinct. You're like, I'm going to create a subsite, and I'm going to create it for HR. If that area is only for people in HR, if it's going to have separate permissions and only HR people are going to get into it, and you're not going to pull information from that subsite into anything else in SharePoint, it's not going to be in any roll-up web parts, it's not going to be in any of that kind of stuff, maybe it should be a site collection instead. Well, the problem is the users can't normally create a site collection, but here they can. So if I turn on self-service site creation, then here it says users can create their own site collections from, and it gives us a link. Unfortunately, this link appears nowhere in SharePoint. Like nowhere in the site do users see this link. And then also, unfortunately, this link won't do what I'm about to show you. So I can click on this link here. I can open it up in a new window, and you'll see it takes me to a page where I can create a new SharePoint subsite or site collection. It says new SharePoint site, but you can see here it's /sites/ and then a name. It's a site collection. It's not going to be just a subsite. That means it's not going to have the same navigation. It's not necessarily going to have the same look and feel. It's going to have completely different user permissions. It's a separate thing altogether. And here I can choose like what kind of site do I want? Do I want it to be a record center, business intelligence? Do I want publishing stuff? I can set who the site collection administrators are right off the bat, and then I can click create. That would be great, except for the whole point of what I'm showing you is where I have published those policies, I want to be able to reuse them. And this page won't do that. So first, I set it to on. I set a quota because I should always have a quota on my site collections. If you don't have quotas on your site collections, I recommend getting some. If nothing else, just take the amount of hard drive space you have on your SQL server and divide it by how many site collections you think you're going to have, and maybe subtract 20%. So that each site collection, if they were all totally full, you'd still have a little bit of space on your SQL server. But something, even if it's 25 gigs, 50 gigs, 100 gigs, set the site collection limit to something. Start a site. So the link to start a site, if it's hidden from users, obviously they can't do it. Prompt the users to create a team site under, and then I've got portal.contoso.com. And here, you may be thinking, like, prompt them where? Like, is it here? It can be. But we're going to show you how to make this accessible to the users in a slightly friendlier way. Prompt users to create a site collection under any managed path, so it doesn't have to be under sites. It could be if you have multiple managed paths. Let's see. I can put the user ID here. It's got some things that I can put in. Like if I put user ID up here, it will create that path for them. But here, if it's /sites, that's the only managed path I've got, fine. But if I've got /sites, /departments, /personal, all those different ones, then I can allow people to choose in the interface. And this may not make sense until you see the interface. And then finally, site classification settings. And this is where it gets important. If I require a choice here, this will take the published site policies and it will require them to choose one before they create the site collection. That way, every subsite, every site collection that they create will have these policies already assigned. And then require a secondary contact is just so that somebody doesn't create a site collection and they're the only ones that even know about it. Everybody needs a backup, everybody goes on vacation, so you want to choose somebody else. But you'll see, if I go in here, none of that is reflected. It doesn't ask me any questions about my backup person. It lets me set one, but it doesn't force it. It doesn't ask me about my policy at all. So I'm not sure how to do this. Well, luckily, I thought through this to figure it out myself. So the next thing you have to do is normally when you read any kind of article about self-service site creation, it will talk about the My Sites. And it will tell you have to turn it on there. And so I did. I turned it on. And after I turned it on, I had to set it from something besides be hidden from users, because even though I turned on self-service site collection, they couldn't see the option to create a site collection themselves. So at first, I would think maybe I would say to prompt users to create a team site under, but here it says mycontoso.com. That's not what I want. prompt users to create a site collection under any managed path, it's still going to be under mycontoso.com. But if I have the display a custom form, and I use this form right here, SelfService create.aspx. This is not actually custom. This is built into SharePoint, but it's just not something that you see anywhere in the interface normally. But this website, if I go to that, and I have made a link to it in my navigation, suddenly you see I have some of the options I wanted. I lose some, but then I gain a few too. So first, I just have to give it a name, and it'll put it under portal. And then add another owner, just in case I'm on vacation or something. And then I have to pick a policy. So by doing this, I have forced them to use these policies. But I don't want to have to necessarily put this link here. So if I set it up in the My Sites, then if you read any article about setting up self-service site creation, it'll tell you to go to the My Sites. And unless you have the option to create site collections turned on and you don't have it hidden from users, you won't see this new site link. But you'll see here, I'm in my site. I am not in portal. I'm in the My Site. But as a user, I get this new site button, and when I click on it, I get the new site option for portal. So even though I'm in the My Site, I'm having them create new sites in portal. And they have to choose a policy. So like I said, it gets a little complicated. It gets a little messy. If I create a test site here, we'll give it a sec. There I am. My whole new site collection. Right where I wanted it to be. I can create new subsites. Got completely different branding. If I go into the permissions, me and farm, the only two people that I specified. So it's a new site collection. It's completely clean. It does use the team site template by default. Unfortunately, I lose the option to do anything about that. I can't make it do anything else unless I create an ASPX site. That's way down the road. I'd have to get Randy involved, or Ryan too. You know, I could get Ryan involved. He could make it have a little dancing bunny on it or whatever. But generally speaking, you know, this is enough. I could make a form that would allow me to choose all the different templates, or I could set it to where it would do a specific template instead of using the team site. So all that stuff is possible, but it's way, way down the road from where we want to be as, you know, business users. And again, a lot of this you can't do yourselves. But if this is something that would be valuable to you, the ability to create subsites it looks like a subsite, it's just not. it is a site collection that just looks like a subsite. I could also put it in other managed paths if I wanted to. So if I go in here, here I have a choice. Is that going to open? There we go. Here I have a choice. But in the portal, it doesn't give me a choice when I go in to create subsites. So I could set it up so that it does /sites, /test. All those things are still on the table. I just have to be a little cleverer about how I do it. But you can see, even though it looks like a subsite, it's not. If I go in here, well, wait a second, maybe it is. That created a subsite. How cool. That's a surprise to me. I apologize. I thought it would create a new site collection. Oh, and that's why. So if I say to this, now if I go in here, I apologize. So you can use it to create subwebs as well. I don't think it took. Oh, it's because I did it in the wrong one. Manage. Oh, I would have to set up a different site. I apologize.
And Stephen, it may be that where you're creating, you already have a site collection in that path with, and so it won't create another top-level site there.
Yeah.
So with your managed paths, sites or departments or whatever, if you create an explicit, it'll only allow you to do one. If you do the wildcard, then of course it would allow the users to create unlimited number of site collections there. And I think that would be there's already a top-level site there, so it's not going to create a site collection.
Right. I was just trying to think of an easy way to make it so that it would point to a new site collection, but there's no way to do that except like I could create a site collection just for that and have it create subsites in there, but I couldn't have it do a new site collection from here. So I just wasn't thinking of it correctly. So it does the same thing as site contents, except for it forces the template, and it forces the policy. So it'll create a subsite. I thought that I had it set up earlier to do a site collection, but I think I must have just been in error. But you could still do that. You could set it up to do a site collection. It would just take a little more editing of the page. And again, way too deep of a topic for right now. But here, you could change this so that it would create a site collection. It gets a little trickier from a permissions perspective, though, because they have to have permissions to the databases and everything. So that wasn't as long as normally when we do these, except for when I do them. When I do them, they're always shorter than normal. Do we have any questions? Nobody? Can anybody see the value here? Like, I know some of our internal people, we have a different setup for creating our subsites because we use a script where people can choose things in a list, because we have a bunch of different choices we made for them, and then we created a PowerShell script. We could have gone through this route, though. We could have done the same thing by setting it up with a custom ASPX page. We were just trying to simplify things a little bit. So like I said, Microsoft has made this a little more complicated than it needed to be, and they also have made it a little more difficult for users to use the self-service site creation. And so for a lot of organizations, this has not been a topic they wanted to dig into, because it was so much easier just to tell people to go in here and create a sub-site. But to allow people to do this is to allow them to set it however they want, and then you have to go back up and clean up after them. With this, they have to choose that policy. And by creating one with that policy already built in, you may only be able to use it for certain kinds of sites. It would have to be a project that has a set limit on it. It has to be a very specific kind of site, because you can't just do it for everything. No one ever knows, if they say, well, we're going to create an HR site. Well, when are you going to be done with HR? Never. We're always going to have an HR department. So we can't set a timeout on that. We can't say, well, that'll delete after a certain period of time. So you're going to want to do normal site collections sometimes for normal subsites. But then if you want users to be able to create ad hoc projects, this is a good way to allow them to do that, where the projects will time out after a certain period of time, or at least they'll close out so that you can set a policy later to find them and delete them after they've been closed. Okay, well, if we don't have any questions, I hope this wasn't too confusing. I knew it would kind of cross over into areas that a lot of business users aren't very familiar with here in central administration and the self-service site creation. And I also apologize for my confusion on the site collection versus sites. But there are so many options that you can dig into here, and so many ways to customize that experience. That's why it's something that takes planning ahead of time, and that's the hardest thing that we deal with as consultants. People come to us after they haven't been planning SharePoint for 3 or 4 years, and they want to impose the planning after the fact. This is a way for you to get ahead of the game. If you can put some parameters around sites right at the very beginning and tell people, like, yes, we can create a site for you, but it's only going to last for 1 year, or it's only going to last for 90 days. That can keep things from just being piled into SharePoint and never being seen again. So be aware of the options that Microsoft has given us. Even though sometimes they have a clunky interface, it's better than trying to fix all of your problems on the back end years after. Okay. If there are no other questions, thank you very much. Hope to see you guys again next week. Let me stop my screen sharing here. All right. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great week.